Are these on?
Hello.
Just goes to the camera.
Okay, perfect. So, thank you everyone for showing up today. We're here to talk about nonprofit collaboration. So what we found is for a long time, the nonprofit sector's been really competitive, right? My donors are your donors, or my volunteers are your volunteers, but what we're finding now is a transition, an opportunity for collaboration. So we've got a really exciting panel with two executive directors of two different nonprofits here in Denver, but also serving the larger Colorado area. And they're going to talk about how they've really embraced this collaborative effort to create a greater social impact for the community. So you guys can go ahead and introduce yourselves.
I'm Naomi Kurland. I am the Executive Director for Longmont Food Rescue. Our mission is to take food that would otherwise go to waste and bring it directly to serve low-income, homeless, and hungry populations. We're a point-to-point rescue service, bring the food exactly to where people work, live, and seek services.
I tried two. Oh, these are super light. Hi, I'm Dave Laskarzuski. I'm co-director of Uproot Colorado. Uproot's mission is to increase the nutrition security of Coloradans by reducing surplus food that is on farms mainly, and also trying to increase the economic security of farmers. So we, both Naomi and I, our organizations are about 6 years old, roughly, 2016, 17-ish. Yeah, and so I think we're going to talk today about the Longmont Community Fridges Project.
Yeah, of course. And with the Longmont Community Fridges Project, there are two other nonprofits involved, right? We've got Growing Gardens out of Boulder and Agape Safe Haven out of Boulder as well. Growing Gardens also grows food, correct? And Agape Safe Haven is a long-term stay. They do 6-month stays for people who are experiencing homelessness. So this is a collaboration across people who work with farmers, people who work directly with getting nutritious food to the people who are growing food through Growing Gardens, and then people supporting the homeless. So when you look at it like that, no one is serving the exact same population the exact way. But by coming together, they're finding a way to impact all of their communities and have a greater impact overall as well. So yes, the Community Fridges Project. Who wants to take it away?
I think it'd be good to just back up for a second and talk about the foundation of the partnerships that went into it, because you just mentioned 4 nonprofits, and we all connected over a different kind of collaborative effort last summer, and that kind of fed into being able to do this Community Fridges project. So last spring, summer, Uproot had reached out to Longmont Food Rescue. They were finding they were having this problem where a lot of volunteers want to volunteer on the weekends, right? That's like prime volunteer time, but a lot of big food banks and food pantries don't have service hours on the weekends. So we are the smaller, more dynamic nonprofit, and we also have volunteers that want to volunteer on the weekends. So we actually provide food services on the weekends. And so we were able to take food from gleans that they would be doing at the farms, and they wouldn't have a, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 sort of distributor to bring it to, and we could bring it to our community distributions and our other residential sites directly. It would get into the community that day, not have to be in cold storage. And so once we started those collaborations, we decided to do some pop-up food distributions together. You want to talk a little bit about the hospital and how they became a hub for us?
Sure. So, sorry. This is really good coffee, by the way. So Longmont United Hospital is part of Centura Health, and Dr. Pearson is kind of the lead there that Naomi is connected with first. And so we've had these, last year we had 2 drive-through pop-up food distributions. So we'd have tents set up in one side of the parking lot, and cars would just kind of roll through. And, we would ask them how many people in your family, and then we had volunteers taking food that we had gleaned from farms earlier that day or the day before, set up in cold storage if it was the day before, and then just put them in bags to distribute to these families. So no paperwork, really no questions asked. If you were hungry and you needed food, you could drive up and get it. And so we did 2 of those last year and 2 more this year, maybe 1 more this year, I don't know, we'll see. But it's really a nice community-wide effort with farmers, producers. There is surplus on farms for a number of reasons: a lack of skilled labor, the cosmetic standards that are implemented in the retail market, so stores want fruits and vegetables to look a certain way. In nature, not everything grows that certain way, but it's still plenty good for you. So farmers do have surplus and they want to feed the community. That's part of their vocation. So we hold these gleans from a number of different farms, mostly in Boulder County, sometimes a little bit outside. And then volunteers help put these in bags and we give them away. So the hospital has been a really, it's a nice pivot point and a place for kind of a gathering place. And then from there, Growing Gardens donated, they got a new walk-in cooler, and they have these 2 commercial refrigerators, standalone, that they donated. They said, you can take them. And so from there, we kind of rolled into this idea of replicating something that's been going on in Los Angeles and other communities, which is a community fridge project. So.
Yeah, and one thing with like collaborating with other nonprofits, it's finding the nonprofits that have aligned services and aligned missions. So something that Dave mentioned is in our food distributions, we have an ethos of reducing any barriers to access, really trying to invite everyone in who could possibly need food services. And so there's no paperwork to fill out. There's no proof of residency. We don't ask for ID or any sort of, paperwork that would be a barrier, and we bring the food right to where people might already be seeking services, like a hospital, like a community center, like a homeless outreach center. And so finding another organization that really committed to not having red tape, not requiring paperwork, made the collaboration easy. And so when we got this donation, again, Growing Gardens had been connected to us as a food donor, got the donation of the fridges. This was another opportunity to provide really open access to like free, nutritious, healthy food that was grown in the community, keep it in the community, and now it's 24/7 food access. So that's something that didn't exist in Longmont before. You'd have to go to points of service to get stuff in very limited hours. And like I said, a lot of the organizations that provide similar services do require paperwork. You have to get registered in their system, and that can be really inhibiting for a lot of people. And so now, to reduce all that stigma, you can just go to one of these beautifully painted art pieces, basically, these community fridges, and get food and also leave food. We have people who are donating. When I went to buy the fridge this past week, I saw that there was some new produce in there, I think, from one of the local growers that was at the hospital. We have a great network of growers at the hospital from Dr. Pearson's efforts that also like to donate food.
And so what would you say when you, circling back to that collaborative effort you guys did for your weekend pop-up food stands, what was the response? Did you see more people in the community getting engaged, both as volunteers and donors, but also as people coming and lining up to get food as well? What was that impact like?
From my standpoint, because we host monthly distributions like this as well in parking lots and parks in Longmont, it was a much bigger scale. We were working with bigger donors because of Uproot's capacity, and they were doing 4 or 5. I think our max was 7 gleans that you did for one of them at different farms, plus the Growing Gardens pickups that I was facilitating at their food project farm, plus the local growers at the hospital that were contributing. We were getting a lot more food than we usually do at one of our smaller pop-ups, and so we were also advertising and getting the word out through farmers market EBT boxes, the food access tents at the farmers market, to get the word out. So we were seeing numbers. I think that we have, at each of those pop-ups, we were serving over 200 individuals, getting fresh food from harvested that day or the day before. And so our impact was definitely greater when we could collaborate.
I will say with that, and you can speak to this, I think, but the big pushback maybe against collaboration is the loss of donors, or the lack of money or funds to do that, or showing that if you're collaborating with another, then you don't need money on your own. But as you were just speaking, there was actually more funding opportunities. Can you talk a little bit about what the funding looked like to undergo maybe that first pop-up and then also into the community fridges now?
I would say that those pop-ups were more about the extra food than the funding itself, but we have been working on some collaborative funding opportunities, and that is an opportunity that I think, like you said, there can be kind of a scarcity mindset in nonprofit world, especially pre-COVID. I was hearing a lot more about people being very competitive about the funding market. And then when COVID hit and there was a lot of just emergency access funds, all of a sudden it opened up some funding opportunities, and we were writing collaborative grants. And I'm hoping that trend continues. We're working on some collaborative grants right now. Maybe you want to share a little bit about funding collaborations?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, it's there's a phrase that I know that came out of one of the African countries that said, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I think the ethos now in the foundational world, so the grant distribution world, is looking for collaborative grants, grant proposals. And it makes a lot of sense. So the goal of a nonprofit, and this is probably Quixotean, but we should be working toward fulfilling our missions. And so it might be faster to fulfill your mission if you go together, or you might have more leverage if you can go together. So, we worked on, Naomi and I worked on a grant for Centura Health. Had a couple of hiccups on that application, but we'll try again next year with that one. But we're also working on a smaller grant for the community in Longmont. And I think that, Uproot itself, we're working to secure. We don't have any infrastructure as far as vehicles, so we're currently working to secure a cold storage vehicle. And if we get that, we've been talking with Naomi that we're going to park it somewhere in Longmont for kind of local access. So together we can use that if we need it. And it makes a lot of sense to try to work together because, look, last year, according to Hunger Free, 1 in 3 Coloradans were what we call food insecure. So you don't know from where your next meal is going to originate. But even more importantly is nutrition security, because you could be food insecure if your cabinet's full of Doritos. But nutrition security is more important than even food security. So I think that there's a lot of benefit to looking at ways to collaborate. So
when you look at this collaborative sphere, what were the greatest opportunities you found, but also the challenges, right? Bringing in other stockholders into the conversation, shareholders, you're dealing with different populations. How did all that come together, and the opportunities that were produced, but also the challenges that came as well with that?
I think some of the opportunities, it's having those aligned mission values and finding where kind of the puzzle pieces fit together of having this excess food, needing it to get it into the community, but also having shared needs, this cold storage, transport of cold storage, the community fridges, being able to have places that have after hours 24/7 access, because that's a common thing that we find in our work is that if you don't have somewhere to bring the food right away, or if we have a distribution and we have excess, we want that to get out into the community right away. We don't want that sitting in storage, going to a regional food bank, going out of the city, out of the region, and then having to be potentially spoiled in the process. So we really want to make sure that the food, the nutritious food that we're gleaning or capturing other ways is going to get to someone's fridge, to someone's stomach. And so because of those shared needs, that was really the greatest opportunity for collaboration. We're like, we will be more powerful if we pool our efforts and do this fridge project together. Challenges, I find one of the biggest challenges, yes, funding, we've talked about, that's always a challenge for nonprofits. I'm sure anyone who's in the nonprofit world has that challenge, and so trying to find those larger collaborative grants that you can do together can really help. I also had a more flexible grant this past summer that I was able to talk to the grant manager and reallocate some funds for this project and spread it across this collaborative project so that we could cover some costs that way. Another one is just that time thing. You said if you go alone, you go faster, right? When you're in a collaborative project with 3-4 partner agencies, you want everyone to have equal stake. You want everyone to have equal voice, and so you're having a lot more meetings. You're having dialogues, and that takes time to get everyone on board with decision making. So just to build that into the planning process for any collaboration, that it might be a slower timeline than if your organization is just going to do it on your own.
Of course. Yeah, do you have anything to add to that?
Not really.
Not really.
I want to make sure I'm not hogging the mic.
Well, we can also open up to questions if you've got any, or not. But just really, it can be an organic conversation. We can speak to that or whatever. Sure. But just about opportunities. So you think in the end, by coming together, you saw already that there were so many more people showing up to the food banks, right, or being served. And then did you notice a greater interest for individuals to get involved on the other side, whether that was through volunteering or donating food? Would you say?
I can give it give it a go. I can say that, Longmont Food Rescue does a really nice job of identifying the need in the community, and the same thing is true of Boulder Food Rescue. Like the community needs and culturally appropriate foods in different neighborhoods. Like that's super valuable because you're talking more about heading toward food sovereignty or food dignity, where people have a choice and they can get what it's culturally appropriate or familiar. Food is powerful. It's a powerful narrative. It's a powerful vernacular. It threads through so much of our society. And there's no reason, with the way farmers and their marriage to the land and what they can produce, there's no reason that people should really be suffering in hunger. And so, we look at food systems work as symptom and systems, and I think you need to look at both. So the symptoms level is how can we get food to people who need it? And then the systems level is how can we begin to alter the status quo to create more equity so the status quo becomes one of equity. And when we get there, then I can go save whales or something. But I think that, collaboration really is the way to do that. And Naomi did speak to, and that's true, when you're working within your own organization and then you're bringing other organizations in, you've got to kind of find a new rhythm because there's new folks at the table. And you do have to allow space for everyone's voice. And then you also have to make a decision. So that it's a balance of both. But, Mackenzie, did you have a question in there?
No, I think that's a good point that you've said there. I'd say, how at the very beginning did the conversation even start? Who initiated looking at this collaboration? Even between,
for the fridges?
Or what even started with the food bank at the beginning, at the very, very beginning?
I think it was that kind of scheduling issue that we spoke of like having weekend services and trying to find someone in the Longmont community that was able to bring food to where it needed to go because of these volunteer hours. Okay. And that's the initial conversation. But I wanted to speak to something that Dave said, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
He mentioned food sovereignty and equity and dignity, and that being another shared mission value of ours, that having that kind of alignment around, we shy away from like a charity model or like, we're giving something to the community. We're providing supports, and we're also trying to empower the communities we're serving and get that piece of food sovereignty. And so having something like a community fridge project really supports that because, as I said, people are bringing food, people are taking food, we're involved in the whole process. We didn't just do these fridges when they were painted and designed. We brought in another nonprofit, Firehouse Art Center in Longmont. They did the design of the fridges. They're another nonprofit that does great art advocacy work and community projects and murals and things. And they designed it, and then actually we did a paint-a-thon day with Longmont high school football team. They had a day of service this summer, and one of the projects they took on was this paint-a-thon. And so along with Longmont Food Rescue volunteers, Uproot volunteers and staff, and also Agape Safe Haven, some of the residents came and helped with the sanding and the priming of these fridges. So the people who were actually going to receive one of the fridges at their site were also involved in like the restoration and beautifying of the fridges. So it was a real collaborative effort to get those fridges designed, painted, beautified, and ready to go. And it was just really cool to see all of that community coming together so that you have more community buy-in, you have ownership, and you have this feeling of it being, we have all of our Instagram URLs on the fridges and on the units. So you can see how many people actually participated in making this a really collaborative effort. And now one of the fridges, like I said, is at Agape Safe Haven. And it is something that the residents are really proud of. Every time I come by to do a little bit of like putting the sealant on it or like dropping off some food or whatever I'm doing over there, come out and talk about the paint job with me. And, wasn't that fun when we had that sanding day? And it's clear that this is something that is now their fridge, and it's also something that's in the community. It's out on the porch, so anyone can access it. It's when their day shelter hours are closed for the day, anyone can come by and get food there. And so that's what's really exciting, I think, about what our organizations do, is it's not just bringing food to the people, it's giving this buy-in and this investment. And I've got one more story I can tell, but I also don't want to dominate the mic.
Go ahead. I think first I do want to say, though, that I think what I'm hearing as well is the collaborative effort between the nonprofits really had an impact on the whole ecosystem of the whole community, right? So whether it was people who participated in the painting or someone who can go drop off food to that local fridge. And so it created more of a full ecosystem of community support. Is that
Exactly.
great?
Yeah. So one story that I just wanted to share, speaking of food sovereignty and the work that Uproot does with gardeners, and that Growing Gardens, another partner, the ones who donated the fridges, does in the community, Agape Safe Haven, they have a slot where they wanted to have a community garden, had set up the lot, and it wasn't getting enough sun. And so one of the things that we used this kind of flexible summertime funding on was to help remove some tree branches that were blocking the light and get it ready so that it can be a growing space for next year. And I just had called Growing Gardens actually about this panel today to see if we could have a representative come. They had a farm glean this morning and couldn't come as well. But they, through that conversation, because of this panel, we started talking to the community gardens, and there might be an opportunity that they want to get involved next year to help develop the garden, to set it up for success, because that's what they do. They teach gardening skills. And so this was a place that already residents, the homeless community, really wanted to be able to grow their own food. There were some barriers to actually being able to grow it because of the sunlight issue, and we're bringing soil amendments next year. Like, there's all these things that we're going to be doing to help develop the land. So in addition to having a fridge, they're going to have a community garden, and because we had the conversation with Growing Gardens about this, now we have another community partner that wants to be part of creating new food sovereignty with Agape. So it's just another piece, and like the more conversations you have, the more you have opportunities to connect with these affiliated and like-minded organizations, the more we can do in our community.
So it's a total domino effect as well, right? So
Yep.
With these collaborations, it's not like a full circle end of conversation, the way you're looping to the next one, whether that started with the food banks and now you're doing the fridges and now this next opportunity to grow gardens in the community.
Exactly.
Well, so I know you guys mentioned making room in the conversation for all the voices when you collaborate. Is there any other points that you really want to highlight about what are the challenges or opportunities, or the opportunity you've made very clear about the community impact holistically, but other challenges that come with this type of collaboration? Or is it more that you really are seeing true opportunity that nonprofits are missing out on, or should really engage with as well?
You want to take
Take a roll.
I also would love to hear you talk about more the farmer component at some point too, as partners.
Sure. That's a good point, Naomi, about farmer partners. I think I'm going to step back for a minute and talk about, when you talk about opportunity, every person is an active member of the food system. And so a lot of people don't think about it that way, but it's true because everyone eats. And so because that's true, and because we've moved away through industrialization and urbanization, kind of away from one of the primary sources of our food, which is the land, those of us with food equity sometimes take it for granted. So the primary component of landfills in the U.S. is food, 25%. Environmentally, that's an issue because food decomposing in a landfill creates methane, so that's a greenhouse gas. So simply thinking about stewardship of your food, which is a life-sustaining resource, and respecting the people who work super hard to bring it to us, like just reorienting back to those values can begin to affect cultural change. And so that's kind of what we need to get back toward. This food on our table, this food in our hands, it keeps us alive. If we eat nutritionally well and we create access, we're going to reduce the burden on the healthcare system. So there's a lot, again, food is such a thread through so much of our culture and lives. At Uproot, we do partner, as Naomi said, we partner with farms, we partner with volunteers, we partner with other nonprofits and organizations. And volunteerism is so important to nonprofits. Really activating the community to go out and spend a couple of hours helping is a huge bonus to nonprofits. But the farmers that we work with, it's truly generosity on their part to donate this food because they can't sell it because of these retail and cosmetic standards. And nature's definition of beauty is virtually infinite. And we've got this retail market sector currently in our culture that looks at every piece of celery or carrot or apple has to look a certain way. But talking about stories, trying to be brief here, I was invited to speak at a middle school prior to the pandemic, and I went in with store-bought organic carrots, and I went to a local farm that's biodynamic and organic, and I got some gnarly looking carrots with respect to what we see in the store. And I had, with the teacher's supervision, I had the kids cut up each carrot. One was purple, one was orange. And then the students blindfolded their classmates, and they taste tested kind of the different carrots without being able to look at them. And most of them chose the biodynamic organic carrots. And physiologically, that's probably even better for you than the organic carrots in the store. So I think we need to widen and broaden our view of what beauty is, and begin to just, again, have more respect for food and for those people, the farmers who bring it to our tables. So.
From there, looking forward, you've got some next collaboration opportunities you're excited about. Are you guys potentially interested too or do you see opportunity in collaborating with nonprofits even who maybe are more education for youth potentially, and looking at that collaboration to create more opportunity for the food education point? Diversifying the collaborations, I mean, that you make. Would that be an area of interest? And is there potential there as well?
Well, I think education is always important. What's awesome about these fridges, and again, the kids from the Longmont High School football team put it together, and their coaches got them out there. Naomi has artistic ability. I just kind of sat and just moved stuff. And then Jenny from Uproot, she also had a lot to do with the artistic kind of component. And then, the Firehouse group were amazing. So they really are beautiful pieces. And I think along those lines, I think they can also offer a place to, if we do it right, to educate the community, because they are in covered spaces. They are well lit, so they kind of have a shelter over them, so people have access out of the weather. But it's also an opportunity, these 2 points, and we'll kind of suss out what's going to happen with them and look for other places in Longmont for more fridges as we go along. But these fridges themselves can be a point of education. Why are they there? What is the reason that people don't have food? What can I do as someone with food equity in the community to help create more equity? So I think that, yes, education is always a part of a nonprofit's journey, and should be integrated into its strategy, because it's the community that ultimately is the change agent.
Of course.
And so if you get more buy-in and more people involved and more people activated, you're going to have a more robust and vibrant and equitable community.
Yeah, and as far as future collaborations, I really think there's infinite opportunity for that. It's more like, limited time and energy on the part of staff and volunteers that can facilitate that collaboration. But the more opportunities for conversation, the more networking events or times that you can have these conversations outside of a meeting, like when I made that phone call to Growing Gardens the other day. It wasn't to talk about future collaborations, but it came up naturally, organically in the conversation. And now we've got actually 2 sites that we've identified for basically food sovereignty for people experiencing homelessness in the community. And the church partners for our work is always huge as well. So church is another partnership that we have 4 different church sites that we are affiliated, 5 maybe, in Longmont, that because they are providing services, they're a great volunteer base, they're really passionate about community impact, and so that's another potential partnership. And yeah, high school students, I've had a couple reach out to say they want to get more involved and volunteer. So yeah, having high school interns and having an internship program, there's that level of bringing in the youth advocacy too. And so I'm really glad we got to partner with the Longmont High School football team for that paint-a-thon. But it's just continually having these conversations. I just saw Elaine at Firehouse Arts Center at a networking event, and we talked about the fridges, and she said, "Oh, any new fridges you get, we would love to design again. We'd love to be involved." So it kind of reestablished that conversation and her interest in being involved as we go forward. So yeah, there's always potential for new collaborations, and also always potential always potential to take existing partnerships and find new opportunities to do more in the future.
Of course. Then one last thing, you guys are also looking at bringing tech into your community fridges.
Absolutely.
What does that look like, and what kind of collaborations in the community are you looking to create for that as well?
Do you want to speak to the tech, or do you want me to?
So
Our big technique right now is we have a web page for the fridges and an Instagram, but we want a dedicated website. But what we want in that dedicated website is to be able to do community check-ins on the fridge. So that means having community members who are either seeking services or dropping off food to, scan the QR code it takes to the website. You can give a status update in live real time, having an interactive map on the website, having mechanisms for doing remote sensor checks, so a door sensor that would alert us if the door was left ajar, so we can go address that. Also, remote temperature checks. All the fridges are keeping temperature and have an internal thermometer right now, but to have one that can connect to the website, and so if there's a drop in temperature or a raise in temperature, we can be aware of it and know that that fridge might need servicing. And so having that kind of networked website is one of our big funding priorities right now, and a need for anyone in the tech industry who wants to get involved in what we're doing. And so related to that is the actual physical digital sensors that will connect to the network.
Okay, I think that's all I've got for questions for now. We'll open it up. Anyone have any questions about nonprofit collaboration or social impact?
I have a few.
Yeah.
The first one is thank you for being here. Longmont Food Rescue. Do you guys work in the same organization?
He's Uproot Colorado.
we should give him a mic.
So, yeah. You've got it.
Sure. First of all, my first question is, how long have you been in the nonprofit world, or these particular nonprofits?
Both of our organizations, Uproot Colorado and Longmont Food Rescue, I think were founded in 2017. So late 2016 was organizing. I think
The idea was like late 2016, but our articles of incorporation with the state was in May of 2017.
Yeah, and we were January 2017. So yeah, almost exactly the same age of organization. So fairly young. 5 years, 6 years from conception. Yeah. And our partnership of doing this work together started last spring. So we're at about a year and a half of this sort of active collaboration.
Are you familiar with the work done in Westwood by Revision? Revision is a nonprofit in Westwood.
Yes. Yep. Yes.
I used to be the director of operation for the Revision. And my last question is, how did you perceive, or what was your experience during the pandemic and you having this collaboration and the community?
Basically, our organization found greater collaboration because of the pandemic. For food access, all the hunger relief stuff, it was a growing need, and actually we are still seeing growing impacts to this day from it. But there was just a huge spike in need for services and for food recovery because we were having restaurants closing. And so we were having, at the beginning of the pandemic, a bunch of refrigerators getting cleaned out, and people calling us being like, we need to be out of our restaurant space today. Can you come pick up some food? So there's like this weird fluctuation with food donations too. Sometimes we get a ton, it was all over the place. But people were really seeking services during the pandemic, and luckily we also had some emergency funding come through, the COVID-19 relief funding, and that really focused on collaborative efforts. We had multiple collaborations that came out of the pandemic. A grocery program with the Longmont Youth Center, doing work with Uproot, that was last year, and addressing those greater needs was part of why we started doing the hospital pop-ups. So I don't know if you want to speak to, on the Uproot side, any of the COVID-19 impacts.
Sure. I think that obviously it was a complete disruption of a global society, and so and when that happens in culture, oftentimes you go back to basic needs. And so what we saw and what foundations began to realize was just the call for basic needs, one of which is food. And so foundations, through the progression of our pandemic here, began to make kind of grant proposals a little more easy. So the ability to write a grant proposal was pared down. Collaboration, money was kind of opened up a little bit because the one of the spotlights was shown on the nonprofit sector in food, those working in food systems, the importance of their work and what they're trying to accomplish and the missions that they have. And so foundationally, locally in Colorado, there was a lot more liberal kind of acceptance of grant proposals, a lot less kind of rigor to a grant proposal, and that was helpful. And I think some of those tenets have been carried on, where foundations are looking to be partners, not just like grantee, grantor. There's this movement, I think, toward a partnership where you have a conversation. And of course, we spoke earlier about collaboration between nonprofits and foundations. And so I think that's the right direction, because no one sector is going to come up with equity and a better, an improved status quo, if you will, on its own. It does have to be this conversation and this moving toward all hands on deck. And I think that's a benefit that came out of a really horrible 2.5 years. So.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things every time I talk to other nonprofits or I'm on kind of calls with networking organizations that do what we do, the common theme of being able to find better, easier funding sources that, are trusting the nonprofits to do what we do best and really not making the grant writing process prohibitive and so time consuming and the reporting systems as well, trying to streamline that, has really benefited the nonprofits, and to encourage these collaborations. And the thing that I hear again and again from other nonprofits as well is, this is what we want to keep from the pandemic. We want to keep this sense of collaboration and not competition. We want to be collaborating for funding sources for program areas. We want to be collaborating and sharing resources instead of feeling like we're always in competition for resources. And the previous funding, pre-pandemic sort of funding model felt very competitive between nonprofits, and just finding ways to strengthen all of the partnerships we made during the pandemic and expand upon them, and not lose that sense of we're all in this together. How can we share resources and have a abundance mindset instead of a scarcity mindset?
So in other words, together we are more, right?
Exactly that.
Do you have a question?
I guess how do you normally go about collaborating with other nonprofits? Do you find them just from going to events and word of mouth, or?
I think, as Naomi said, it's really an organic, like, as a nonprofit, you have your mission. You have either your advisory council if you're fiscally sponsored, or if you're a registered nonprofit, you've got your board. And so you decide upon what your mission is. And missions can evolve over time. It doesn't need to be set in stone. But if you have your mission, every decision you make should be, how do we take a half step closer to that mission? And along the way, if you keep an open mind and an open heart, you allow for kind of organic connection. And so I think what Naomi mentioned before is kind of this whole, with Growing Gardens and Longmont Food Rescue and Longmont United Hospital and Firehouse, it's all about, if you have a need, maybe make an ask. And someone says yes, and then you start talking. So it doesn't have to have this formality. It's just a conversation, which is so much part of like human nature, just to have conversations. Like, this is why coffee shops stay in business, because people want to share what's going on with them and listen to what's going on with others. And through those sharings, you have these organic developments about, wow, there's a connection there. I can help you, and you can. And so it just happens organically. And I think those organic connections kind of have resilience and the sustainability ethos to them, where they can continue and see what happens, versus trying to contrive it. And I think that just from a conversation, just being open to them, and again, looking toward your mission along the way, along your path and your journey. And the same is true of individual journeys. Like, everybody has this vocation within them. What is it that I want to do and use my talents to accomplish? If you follow that path and you're true to your own voice, along the way, you'll find and meet people and opportunities that allow for your growth too. So it's just being open to opportunity and connection.
And I think that networking organizations too, it really depends how established your nonprofit is. And if you're newer to the landscape, trying to find other groups that are doing what you're doing or similar things in the same sector is really helpful. Finding, any sort of nonprofit networking sites, any sort of nonprofit like there's a Food Rescue Alliance that we're a part of, and there's Food Security Network. So there's things that are also just tailored to what our specific work is. And so if you're newer and you want to kind of see what the scene is like, look within city but also regional networks and partnerships, and some of those larger grant collaborations come out of that. And then once you know those organizations or have found an online connection to them, to then set up these in-person meetings, seeing where their site is, visiting them, seeing what they're actually doing on the ground. Because meeting people, having those phone calls or in-person communication really is where you're going to get, okay, this is an opportunity I didn't even think of before. If I hadn't visited the Agape Safe Haven home site, if I hadn't actually gone there, I wouldn't have seen their community garden in the back, realized that they had a need to have that developed, and we wouldn't have started on a project that we're going to continue into next year. Mackenzie, maybe you could talk a little bit about Lighthouse here and what you guys do.
Sure. I think what made me so excited to bring together this panel and for you guys to be here too is me and my partner at Lighthouse, we see so much opportunity in collaboration, right? And we're seeing it right here, what can happen in the community impact that comes from it. And so our whole goal is to make these type of collaborations easier, so that if it is word of mouth or if it is opening up the conversation, we're giving you a place to do that, right? To find new nonprofits, whether you knew about growing gardens or not, or whether you knew about nightlights or not, being able to find those and see what other opportunities can grow from it. And so we're a community of over 200 nonprofits officially. So it's growing, and it's all here in Denver, and it's an exciting energy behind it. And so we're just excited to see more collaborative opportunities ahead for nonprofits like you guys. Yeah. And the community too. That's the plus. You have a question? Yeah.
Yes. What are you guys doing to empower the community that you guys are supporting or serving?
So the partnerships is not just partnerships with other nonprofits or with the food donors. It's the community, like you said, the communities we're serving, the recipient sites. So part of that is inviting in and partnering with the population served. The ways we do that, like I mentioned, the garden project and the fridge project, we had folks from Agape who are residents who are getting services at that site come and do the sanding and the painting and be part of that process. Also with the garden, when we're clearing out tree branches and stuff, and as we work on this garden, we're going to be working alongside, shoulder to shoulder with the people who live there and the people who are going to be growing the food, and then bringing in that educational component with growing gardens as we start to develop that garden. So that comes out of not just showing up and being like, hey, we should have a garden here. We showed up, we found that they had a site for a garden that they wanted to develop. We had conversations, basically. It's sitting down, having conversations in the community and saying, what do you want to do? What are your needs? And how can we support that? How can we empower you? How can we help you achieve those goals and provide the skill sharing and the actual physical resources that you need to get this project off the ground? And so it is having those in-person conversations, I think. With setting up a new site, when we do a new distribution site at a residential community, we're just setting up a new one at a mobile home community in Longmont. This has been a 3 or 4 month process of community building with the residents there, because we're not going to just show up and be like, here's some food, and throw up some tables and just be like, we're here. We really want the residents to feel like it's their program. They have site leads. They have people who know their neighbors, know their community, know how best to connect and interface. And with that site, it happens to be over 80% Spanish-speaking population. So one of the really big, important things we wanted to do is make sure we have interpreters at every single meeting, at every single event, so that we can have full participation with that community and not have it feel very one-directional. We want this to feel like a collaboration. And so we've really put a lot of effort into developing these residential sites that it doesn't feel, like I said, we're not a charity model, we're an advocacy model, we're an empowerment model. So we see them as community collaborators and true partners.
I think that, from Uproot's standpoint, it's about connecting, leveraging community volunteerism, and getting people to where a primary source of your food is. So the land is a primary source of our food, also the sea. In this case, in Colorado, the more people that we can get onto farmland to experience harvesting, essentially. We're harvesting surplus, but it's the act of harvesting between gleaning events are between 2 and 4 hours. And people realize how hard it is. And they're there for a sliver of a season. But we also encourage people to take some food home with them, to share it with their household or their friends or their neighbors, and let that experience continue on throughout their day. And so we call that community cultural food wisdom, which we think there's a lack of right now because we've become urbanized, we've become industrialized in a way, that we need to remind ourselves the value, the true life-sustaining value of food. So our theory is the more people we can get onto farmland for even a small period of time to kind of remind us the value of the land and of food, that will begin to affect culture positively in our own communities. So that's kind of how we look at activating community.
Do you guys use community connectors or navigators to support your mission? Do you use community connectors or navigators to support your mission, or maybe those volunteers that you're talking about?
So what, if you're looking at the promotora model, in a way, Uproot currently works across 12 counties. There are 64 in the state. And the Good Food Collective down in the southwest area, they do some gleaning in La Plata and Montezuma counties. So we've been trying to develop this idea of our coordinators are currently part-time. We've got 4 of them, which is, it's not enough time. So from a capacity standpoint, these roles need to be closer to full-time. And there are 2 full-time staff at Uproot. So we've strategized on multiple occasions about trying to take the promotor model and leverage it in areas where there are more Latino, Latinx individuals, and leveraging a staff member who would be full-time to what Longmont Food Rescue does well, really understanding the community at a street-by-street level, neighborhood-by-neighborhood level. We haven't gotten there yet because it's a matter of capacity. As Naomi said, we're still young organizations, and we've had our growing pains this year where it's become eminently evident how, we need more capacity building. So, yes, your idea is absolutely relevant. We haven't gotten there yet.
Thank you for the work you do, guys.
Yeah, and I think that for that connector piece, it is by viewing the community members that you're serving as collaborators, doing frequent surveys, optional surveys, but anonymous ones, so that we get a sense of what needs are we meeting, what aren't we, what are other needs of the community, and how would people want to be more involved. And then the people who want to be more involved, setting up those meetings to get that direct feedback, to have the conversations, and really sitting back and listening, and not trying to just say, I have an idea for a program and we do X, Y, and Z and that's how it's going to be executed. But having people who we consider the people who step up, say they want to be more involved in the program and have some sense of food sovereignty. There are community leaders, and there are on-site experts. They know their community better than we are going to, even though we are Longmont local. Like you were saying, every neighborhood, every street, homeless communities are going to be different than even people who are the homeless communities who don't have housing, who are in transitional housing, who are living in a car. All of them have different needs and have a sense of what their individual networks look like. And same, our senior residences would have a higher disabled population compared to our youth center connections, where they're looking for different types of food. Homeless communities, a lot of times we're looking for grab-and-go meals. And so really hearing what are your food needs? A lot of our homeless outreach services can't, unless they have food prep on site, they can't take some of the donations we would get from Uproot. We need to bring those to people who have refrigerators and kitchens that they can utilize. And so we'll work with a convenience store to get the grab-and-go sort of sandwiches and salads that are ready to take with you. And that can be really helpful. So we wouldn't know all of this information about what food do you really need, and also how can we empower you to grow your own, how can we empower you to do these other projects you want to do, if we weren't having conversations regularly.
I think to that it speaks about how in this sector, you're not just a participant or a volunteer or a donor, or you're an employee. And I think you guys do a really great job showing that holistic nature, that if you treat a person as if they're all three, because they can be all three, it builds a stronger community as well. So I think that is our panel for the day. Thank you guys for participating, and I hope you guys learned something as well. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, you guys did great. I really appreciate you.
Hey, Mackenzie.
It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too. Hi, by the way, my name is Antonio.
Naomi.
Dave Lester. Thanks for the questions.
Oh, my pleasure. I think you guys are cooking something wonderful. And I think in moments of struggle like the pandemic is when you see actually the power of what you planted. When you harvest all that force from the community, and those getting together in collaboration can make great things. Revision, I worked for them. I actually got into Revision because my mom used to be a garden participant of them.
Oh, wow.
And one of the promotoras got me from some of the issues that I had at that moment and got me connected to Revision.
Wow.
And when you empower a community, we get to places like where I am right now. I work for the Minority Business Office for the state.
Wow.
And again, it's more than just the food. It is the capacity that you're injecting and the empowerment that you provided to this that we are connected to.
Yeah.
So thank you for the work you guys do.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, I'm so glad. Are you sticking around for some other
Just for a
sessions?
little bit, I got a couple of things but I didn't want to miss yours. And I was struggling trying to
I
find
know,
the
I know.
place.
The layouts are a little funky back here.
Yeah,
But.
and the noise was overwhelming. But anyway, thank you for your time. And if I can do anything, I truly believe that anyone that even if you're not in the economic development effort, should be providing economic development resources to the people that you serve. Because if I feed you today, you gotta eat tomorrow.
Yeah.
The day after we have this conversation.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is that when you unplug that support, our community goes down.
Yeah.
But if you do your work, but also partner and collaborate with others that are doing economic development,
You can build up the whole ecosystem.
you can actually get funding from those who get that.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
If you're interested,
Thank
this
you.
is my card, and I'll be happy to share some of the information that I learned.
Do you want to write your info on that?
Yeah, I've got a digital one.
Sure. But great work. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of
Thank you
course.
for having this
Of
space.
course.
Yeah, I would not
this
miss
is
it for
great.
anything.
I hope you enjoyed it.
I love it.
I hope you
love
enjoyed it as well.
What's your
Okay,
name?
good.
Sean Antonio.
He works with
Nice to
another
meet you.
local nonprofit as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What's the nonprofit?
It's called Night Lights. We provide respite care for families with special needs kids.
Awesome. Yeah. I just discovered that, we provide support to small business owners, especially minorities, but I kind of remove the label of minorities, and by itself, I increase the access, let's put it that way. But also, we created a program that helps turn skills into businesses or ideas into businesses. And I'm getting support from random people, random organizations, even though they're not connected to the economic development percent. And I'm changing the model how the Office of Economic Development and International Trade are actually giving sponsorships and grants, and I'm basing those supports on the impact that I'm receiving. So I ran the first round in June, and I went to my list of those who are referring my customers to my platform, and I got the top 20 out of 1,200, by the way, in 6 months. And I got coaches, I got outreach organizations. Revision was not part of that list, which is sad, but I got mentors. I got obviously the SBA, the SBDC, which is the Small Business Development Center, which is my technical assistance arm to support small businesses in general. But the point is, like, anyone can actually help to activate economic development by just sharing the resources and pointing, here's where you need to go.
That's so true. I think that there's a cultural belief that, like, what can one person do? they're like,
Oh, yeah.
yourself now. But there's a lot.
Look, Mom. I made that.